It's really a great pleasure to be invited to chair this event. My name is Professor JoAnn McGregor. I'm Professor of Human Geography in the School of Global Studies. I'm also Director of the Sussex Africa Centre, which is a new initiative trying to bring together Africa expertise and debate across the campus. But I'm no Nigeria expert, so I shall chair this from the position of ignorance. And I very much look forward to hearing and to introducing our distinguished panel of guests. First, I must say a great thanks to Luqman. This initiative is very much his initiative, from the initial idea through all of the effort to put it together. So I don't want to take any of the credit of that. Thank you so much. It's really fantastic to see so many people here in the audience, and it's testimony to the importance of the topic and the new connections with Nigeria that it's really great that you've put this together. So thank you so much. So we have four speakers this evening. I'll say a few words about them first. On my left here we have His Excellency Dr. Dalhatu Sarki Tafida, who's the Nigerian High Commissioner from London. Thanks so much for being with us today. Our second speaker is Charmaine Pereira, whom you've already seen online. Charmaine, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Thank you. She's coordinator of the Initiative for Women's Studies in Nigeria, and now works for Tapestry Consultancy, I believe.
Yeah. Director.
Thanks, yeah. Then our third speaker is Professor Jeremy Keenan from SOAS. He's Professor of Anthropology and Sociology. He's published widely on the politics of the Sahel and on militarization in Africa. Thanks so much for being with us this evening. Then our fourth speaker is Ibrahim Abdullahi, who may also be online through a connection. We're not quite sure. He's initiator of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. His internet connection went offline a few minutes ago, but we're hoping that later in the evening he'll be with us. And then also on the panel we have Abubakar Kagu, who's studying for his PhD in the law department here at Sussex, and also from Nigeria. So we have 4 or 5 speakers, depending on the connection. And I'll hand over first to His Excellency Dr. Tafida to begin our debate this evening. Each of our speakers is going to speak for 10 to 15 minutes so that we have a lot of time for questions afterwards. So, over to you.
I have to get up. Madam Chairman, co-speakers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I feel highly honored to be invited to lead this discussion, what people popularly call Boko Haram. Now, Boko Haram, I like to explain. Boko Haram are 2 words. One is a Hausa word, that is one of the major tribes in Nigeria, Hausa, and Haram is Arabic. Now, Boko really is book. You know, when we went to school in the early 40s, our colleagues, you know, were calling us Mboko. That's, these people have become people of the book. That we have gone into primary school and we are learning. That's Boko. And Haram, to these people, is a name given to themselves, but the real name is also a long Arabic word which my colleague Malam Ibrahim Abubakar will explain. But Haram means forbidden. And in fact, to be candid, I did not know the name Boko Haram until about 7 or 8 years ago, when the leader in Maiduguri was killed by the police. The people were saying, oh, the leader of Boko Haram, Boko Haram. I said, who is Boko Haram? And that was the beginning of my knowledge about Boko Haram. And since then, they have grown from strength to strength. I believe this may be because in those days, the government then did not take them seriously. They felt, they are just miscreants, group of young people lay about. Most of them also have gone to school. They were in school. They went to secondary school. Some were even, up to university. Yet they say what we are learning, Western education is haram. Why? I can't explain why such group of people call Western education haram. There are so many discrepancies and I think contradictions in the name. They ride motorcycle is invented through the Boko book, the education, Western education. They ride cars. They use so many Western things that they say is haram. So we begin to wonder, why should such people suddenly become so hostile and start killing people? The leaders thought it was because of poverty. But we have poverty literally everywhere in Nigeria. We have poverty, except of course the degree of poverty. We have unemployment also in Nigeria. So why should their own be different? People like me felt it was political. That we thought initially they were being used by politicians who wanted to be heard and wanted to take power. And the stories we have is that Boko Haram itself originated in that area of Borno State, and because some people, the leadership in that area, wanted to retain power for as long as they liked. And during elections, they used them to scare people and to do whatever they like with the votes of the people and declare their own results. And this has continued for long until when it became very serious and it went beyond the Borno State as we know it today. They committed havoc in other states, in Yobe. Of course, Yobe is the second home of Boko Haram. Other areas, they were in Kaduna, other area up, down south. They were even in Abuja, in the police headquarters. They nearly killed the then Inspector General of Police, but God saved him and he was behind, they left him behind. So they entered the headquarters of the police and killed several people. Now, when finally government decided to take action and put the military to really fight them, they had already grown strong, very strong. People like us even felt they were getting assistance and training from outside the country. Initially, we thought they were getting assistance from the failed Libyan state. And then the same failed Libyan state provided insurgents to Mali, and some of them somehow gravitated to Nigeria and somehow embarked on the training of these young unemployed youth. The military it seems, until recently, seemed to be unable to control them. they somehow found themselves, they were so powerful, they took over towns and villages, took over a large forest bordering Borno and Cameroon, and they literally, everything they had there, they were inside and they would come out in the daytime. They would go and commit havoc, buy what they wanted to eat. They would go back like normal people. You wouldn't know them. You know, they dress like you and me. You know, they come into the town, do whatever purchase they want to do, but when they want to commit arson, they go without notice. And this has happened times without number. The government, on advice, decided, because everybody believed that it was because of unemployment and poverty, provided a lot of schemes to provide jobs in the area, provided also some schools for those miscreants who are not at all attending school. But still, this thing has continued. There were attempts to even sign an agreement to talk to them. At least what we heard, they named some names, that those that are the ones they would be prepared to talk to. But of course, some of them refused to participate in the negotiation. The government set up a body to go and negotiate with them. We didn't see them as a body though, but the people, the government committee came up with a report that, well, so many demands, some of which I think the government rejected. But the important one is about poverty, which the government is tackling, and so on. But later on, they even rejected all the demands they made. And it was all fighting and fighting and fighting. To be candid, people in Nigeria felt the government had not done well at that time. And somehow they provided resources, the military were there, they were right there, they had a barrack called, is it Baga? Yeah, Giwa Barrack, yes. Giwa Barrack, just around after Maiduguri, and they were doing well. Somehow something happened. One day they even went and overran the barrack and took over all the equipment they have and ran away with them. Now, the truth is that personally, I cannot explain what Boko Haram actually, those people want. I can't. I work in government, but I cannot tell you. When I see them, we converse like I converse with Mala Abubakar here. I wouldn't know, but their minds, it's just like those that we see in other developed countries. They are normal, they attend to universities, and when they want to commit something, they are knowledgeable. Somehow they commit an arson and disappear. Some of them, of course, are caught. So the truth is that Boko Haram is a tragedy to Nigeria. It is, but I have one belief. As a Nigerian, I also believe that Boko Haram will be conquered. One day, and I am sure you will look for me and say, I told you that there will be an agreement between Nigeria and those groups of people that they call themselves Boko Haram. Because if it is poverty, government is doing everything possible to provide resources. If it is education, government is doing extra for that area, but still it is there. But the activities of the sect somehow has diminished of recent. It had diminished, you hardly hear them, but of course that doesn't mean that they have disappeared. I'm sure, don't be surprised if tomorrow you hear that they put a bomb in one marketplace or another, don't be surprised. I don't know where they get their training, but experts are there who have studied the Sahel region of Africa. Maybe they know how they get their training. They're experts, they know how to handle guns. They can fight where our soldiers sometimes find it difficult to be. And it's amazing. You see them with tattered vehicles, yet they can fight. Although it is in the mind. It is in their mind. They believe in something. This is why they are able to persist for so long. But I think the best thing is when there are questions, I will try to answer some of the questions. Thank you very much. I hope I'm within my limit.
Thanks so much. Perfectly within limit. Exactly 5 minutes to the second. 15 minutes. Okay, so we'll go straight over to our second speaker then, Charmaine Pereira, who's there, I hope, still with us over the Skype connection.
Yes, I am.
So please, we look forward to hearing your address.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm actually very happy to be connected. I'm really going to talk about a perspective on gender and conflict in the context of Boko Haram. And before I start, I should actually say that Boko Haram has evolved over a long period of time. It's no longer what it used to be, and there have been several transformations over the years. So it's a complex formation, and one time, and I think this is possibly still the case, it was said to be made up of at least 6 factions, 6 groups, characterized different priorities and possibly competing leadership as well. Now, everyone, I can safely assume, knows about the abduction of Chibok girls in April 2014, on the night of the 14th and 15th of April. And that, in a sense, crystallizes the kind of violence that Boko Haram has carried out and stands out really in many people's minds, simply because of the scale of that event. And what this does is it also feeds a sense of belief that conflict takes place under conflict situations and insurgencies such as this one are somehow completely different from anything else that happens. Now, there is an element of truth in this, but it's also a bit more complicated. Certainly, abductions on this scale of nearly 300 young women and schoolgirls all at once in an educational institution, is not something normal. But at the same time, abductions have not been the exclusive preserve of Boko Haram. So, for example, in Abuja, one of the state agencies, the Environmental Protection Board, in its effort to try and clear the streets of criminality, at one time, and I'm not so sure if they still do this now, but a couple of years ago, this was the case, they would abduct single women off the street if they were there on, on their own after 8 p.m. The rationale, to the extent that one can talk of a rationale here, is that, this sort of thing encouraged criminality and promiscuity and so on, and so the solution was to get rid of the women themselves. In other parts of Nigeria, abductions of both men and women take place for different reasons. They can be for ransom, for example, in the southeast and south, or for reasons such as, targeting particular individuals for political reasons. So what I want to get across is a sense that even in peacetime, there is a high tolerance of violence against violence in general, but of specific forms of violence that we can experience. And these range from the kinds of violence that may be perpetrated in private spaces, in the home, wife beating, to the street, to schools, to educational institutions. And of course, Nigeria is not the only place where this happens. In most parts of the world, violence in conflict, in times of conflict, do not come out of, spring out of nowhere. They don't take place in a vacuum. What is more likely to be the case is that you see an amplification of the type of violence that is considered normal in times of peace. But so there's more of it, it's on a larger scale, it's more horrendous, but there is also a distortion. So you get things like mass abductions, which the Chibok incident was about, and that is not something one ordinarily see. So we have to recognize that what gender perspective brings to our understanding of the situation is this recognition of commonalities between peacetime and time, as well as things that are specific to that situation. And we also recognize that the society, violence has been part of the way in which governments and also social relations operate. Excuse me. Nigeria has been a country, like many colleagues, the experience of colonialism, institutes violence of a particular kind with the formation of the state. But it was also then superseded and it removed from most time that Nigeria has been a country. So even though there was a transition to civilian rule in 1999, most of Nigerian political history has been characterized by this form of governance where violence and authoritarianism, it shapes the kind of relations between the state and the state. And that has implications for economic conditions, for politicized differences, ethnicity, class, and so on. These social, which all feed into social inequalities. So, for example, Borno State, which is the state most heavily affected by the insurgents in the northeast, is one of the poorest in the country. And not many people know that. The Niger Delta, the south side, is known as being one of the poor parts of the country, but the northeast is arguably even poorer than that. And so there have been various conditions that kind of feed into the emergence of Boko Haram in the northeast. And the role of the state is not partitioned from that. So one has to also ask, how has the state contributed to the formation of Boko Haram? I will only and that's a big question, you know. But I will only point to ways in which the gendered actions of state officials, state personnel, and so on, have contributed to that. So, for example, in the earlier around, I was since 2009, which when Boko Haram became the kind of formation that we now see as being. When the JTF was first, this task force, this is the military kind of grouping, was sent to Yobe, capital of Boko State, which was the seat of much of the conflict, to address the insurgency there. Many people were saying, you know, the JTF, because their own understanding of conflict was that, well, these people are located in the communities, and the communities are civilians. So if they won't yield the terrorists to us, then we will deal with the whole community. And they would go into houses, they would raid houses at night, take away the young men, and steal, but so on. So their actions contributed to a great sense of grievance that people had about our governments in that part of the country. So if you can see how in times of peace, violence against women takes a sexualized form. I mentioned just the environmental protection books, but also that are tolerated, normal, you know, mostly men, but in some instances also in families, communities, and so on. And with that gets accentuated in times of conflict. And what that also does, it heightens a sense of male authority. So male authority, whether in the form of soldiers, or politicians, or just men in general, even if these are men who might be at the receiving end of the insurgency in relation to the women that they are close to. And so here there's a tendency to speak of women as primarily victims and giving protection. Now it is true that more women who are targets of conflict, and many of the internally displaced people are disproportionate women and children. But one shouldn't centralize the character of women in this in terms of victims. So it's not women's biology that makes victims. It's social relations, domination, where women are maybe seen as the property of men, or movements with less positive agency, with lower access to resources, and who have such resources needed through marriage and so on. And that, so all that, you know, creates a situation. And it can also make it sometimes hard to recognize that women may also be involved in violent extremism. So they may be involved in Boko Haram either as recruiters, or as people who support husbands or partners who are already members of Boko Haram. And sometimes that engagement or recruitment of themselves is unwanted. But other times it is actually something that women take on and choose for themselves. The violence that we talk about, we have to recognize that this is not violence that is simply located in individuals. Okay, so it's not that there are just a few bad apples, whether in the army or in society in general, a few bad men who go out and do terrible things to women. Violence can become structured in a society. So if you have different kinds of hierarchies overlaid on top of one another, so hierarchies of religion, of ethnicity, of class, and so on, which politicians may draw on, particularly at times of transition like elections. These tend to generate divisions amongst people, which may not necessarily have been there before. So, for example, in many parts of the North, we recognize how diverse that is. The Northeast, for example, is it, or not biggest, but I don't know which is the one furthest to the south, is actually about 50-50 Christian and Muslim, and there is considerable ethnic diversity amongst those groups, and it's very often, at times of elections when politicians feel that there might be certain capital, political capital that might be made out of trying to gain votes from some groups than others, these kinds of social differences are accentuated. Men sometimes are part of that, but other times they're organized across these lines of difference. And one of the things that I and a colleague of mine who set up an organization in Yobe, the capital of Jamal, for the Center for Women and Adolescent Empowerment of children, primarily to try and intervene in the kind of violence that has been, that has been kind of generated by the insurgency and so on, is to deal with the trauma, to try and put in place mechanisms to deal with the trauma arising from insurgency, and that's by organizing training for lay counselors based in the 3 different states of the Northeast, and here we're doing, so this is, and we're working with women and men and different stakeholders in different states, so that the violence that has already been perpetrated does not get perpetuated further down the line, because violence leaves a legacy. Sexual violence particularly, it's very difficult for women to speak out because of the stigma, because of the tendency to ask men questions about whether have they contributed to their own violations and so on. But if people are conscientized as to how this happens and
Hi, Charmaine. Your 15 minutes is more or less up. You're also breaking up a bit, so maybe just a final couple of comments.
This is an attempt to try and deal with that by engaging in a network of people who will be working at community level. So, the violence that is gendered need not necessarily continue to be so. Thank you.
Many thanks. Okay, we'll move straight on to our third speaker, Professor Jeremy Keenan from SOAS.
Lovely, thanks. Well, let me start off, as I seem to always do these days, with a couple of apologies. Firstly, for remaining seated, which is the lesser of the two. The more serious one is that really I am a bit of an imposter here, in that I'm not an expert on Boko Haram. I've never really worked with Boko Haram or in northern Nigeria for that matter. And in all probability, the majority of you in this room probably know more about Boko Haram than I do. So that's for starters. And it's a good job we've only got 10 minutes because that's about all I have in the way of knowledge on the subject. Until a strange thing happened about last July, this summer gone, when a colleague, who I won't mention his name for the obvious reasons, who had been working in northern Nigeria for a very, very long time and has profound knowledge of the region and all its languages and dialects and so forth, contacted me and said, could I help him with a problem, an investigation? And that is what got me engaged in this problem, if you like, that he had. And I should say that what I'm saying to you, I haven't published, so this is really not quite straight off the cuff because I jotted down a few notes on it because they were sent to me by this colleague. So in a sense, I'm paraphrasing quite a lot of his research here. He came to me with these questions really relating to the deaths of Yusuf Muhammad himself, the founder of Boko Haram, who was killed by the police in their custody in 2009, but two others, two more prominent, or most very prominent Salafi if you like, leaders in northern Nigeria, namely Jafar Mahmoud Adam, who was murdered in 2007, a little before Yusuf, and Awal Albani Zaria, who was murdered in February 2014. And I'm guessing that it was that last death that triggered this sort of inquiry which came through to me. Now, both of those last two were very close to Muhammad Yusuf. They were, in a sense, his two mentors. He confided in them, and there's a vast amount of literature, writings, letters, and communications between him and them, which this colleague of mine had been working through. Now, the official truth is that they were killed for speaking out against Boko Haram and criticizing it from an Islamic point of view. In other words, the classic moderate cleric versus the radical cleric. But my colleagues suspected, as I also do perhaps now, that that was only a partial truth, that in both cases the problem was more about what they were revealing, or more importantly, what they could reveal about the genesis of Boko Haram, which goes back, of course, to 2002. Jafar, for example, in his very last speech, before he was murdered, alluded to an American involvement in Yusuf's activity, and that was at the time when Boko Haram had yet to develop into a fully fledged, if you like, extremist terrorist organization. While Albani, he mentioned, just before his death, on several occasions actually, he mentioned references to Algeria. So the first question that I was given by my colleague, based on the fact that my own area of research, which has gone on for a very long time, has been just to the north of, if you like, Nigeria, mostly the Sahara in general, the Sahel, the various terrorist, extremist, militant groups working throughout that vast sort of area. That was my sort of expertise, if you like. So he came to me and he said, can you try and check these deaths out a little bit? So the essence of it was, what was this Algerian connection, if any, that had come up with his two mentors? And I'll now sort of tell you a story which is a little bit incredible perhaps, but it's true, and this is going to be heavily published fairly shortly. This is that in the middle of the southern part of the Algerian Sahara, no, it's not so far north of Nigeria, was a supposed so-called Al-Qaeda training camp, which was founded probably in about 2003-04. It moved out of Algeria into northern Mali in about 2008-09. So it was running between that period of time. Now, it was nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. It was actually being run by the Algerian secret police, the DRS, masquerading, if you like, or not even masquerading, but in the name of Al-Qaeda. There's Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. The Algerian secret police were very closely allied to American and British intelligence services, and what was happening in this camp is that people from all over the sort of Muslim-speaking world, or the Muslim world, right across Central Asia, sort of Yemen, the Gulf areas, most of the Sahel, North African states, were coming through for training, mostly in killing techniques, mostly égorgement, throat slitting, etc., but other killing techniques and so forth. As they came into the camp, their IDs were taken and so forth, and those IDs, fingerprints, blood, and probably DNA, I think ocular recognition as well, were passed up to Algiers and then into British intelligence and American intelligence. In other words, the West was having, if you like, through this camp, access to pretty well all those, or a large number of people being trained by these movements. They had their IDs and so forth. My own speculative view on this is perhaps why there haven't been any really major spectaculars, if you like, since throughout much of this time, that the West had too much inside knowledge and it was coming from this so-called training camp. Well, I was able to get access to some of the people in that camp and was able to establish that Yusuf was in fact there. He was trained in that camp by the Algerian DRS. Dates are a bit dodgy, 2006-ish, at a plus or minus a year or so, which, as you will remember, was the time, particularly when American, if you like, propaganda on the war on terror in Africa was very high still, and they were linking and trying to show that the whole of the Sahel was one great long sort of terrorist belt, linking Akim, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab. It was all one great long sort of terrorist zone, as they called it. So it was at that sort of time. So the question, interestingly enough, when I asked and started making inquiries into the camp about Yusuf, his nickname there was Fat Boy. A better translation I found out was probably the chubby one. And those of you who know his picture, he was a little bit on the overweight side. So the third point I want to make is, was Yusuf killed by the intelligence services? He was in police custody because of his Algerian and other external connections, i.e. he knew a bit too much. Also, some of that sourced information suggests that a lot of his ideas that he brought back to Boko Haram came from the Algerian secret police in Algeria, particularly much of what he had to say about the ideology of Boko Haram and Western education and so forth. Moving on, that relates to the fourth point, which is the whole question of his replacement, Abubakar Shekau. In essence, a lot of evidence has been forthcoming that he was actually killed in 2013, and that the Shekau that you now see on videos and so forth is an imposter, etc., etc., etc. I won't get into details of that. The evidence for that, to me, trying to look at it objectively, looks as if there may be something in it. And interestingly enough, much of those earlier videos that showed him before 2013 have been withdrawn, taken down, and have sort of disappeared off the various media. So the question is whether there is one Shekau and a following Shekau. And I should say that would not strike me as unusual, because if there is this Algerian link, one of the key ways in which Algeria has, in a sense, maintained terrorism throughout much of the Northern Africa and elsewhere is through the infiltration of terrorist groups through the 90s and right through since then, but also the creation of franchise terrorists. For example, Abdulhamid Abu Zaid, who was the leader of ACME in the region for some time, or in the Sahara, who was killed allegedly a year or two ago, actually was a man called Al-Farati. Well, he was who he was, but his photograph is the photograph of Al-Farati. So the identity that you find on the media is not him, but someone else. This is not unusual. Mokhtar Ben Mokhtar, probably the best known of all the Saharan so-called extremist terrorists, I have grave reservations as to whether he is actually alive. He has been reported dead 9 times. I've got a hunch that the 7th could have been fairly terminal in that he was allegedly hit by an RPG in the chest. And I haven't met anyone else who's survived that. And there's a lot of other evidence that raises this out. So this idea of franchised so-called terrorists is by no means new, and I could talk about that for a long time. The final point I was asked to investigate was the relationship, or what was the Al-Muntada Islamic Trust, which my colleague and several other people believe is heavily implicated, or was, in the sort of genesis of Boko Haram. Now, I don't know if any of you know Al-Muntada. I'm not an authority on it at all. I'm aware of it, and I've done a little bit of checking out on it. It's registered in London, just down the road from Chelsea Football Club. I don't know if that's anything to do with it. Very open, very brazen. Actually, it's Parsons Green, to be precise. But there are a lot of alleged links, and quite definite links, actually, between this Islamic charity and elements of Boko Haram, particularly in its formative sort of period. The question is, given the way in which British intelligence services have kept an incredibly close rein on pretty well all charities, but anything that has any smack of Islam in it, they appear to be watching like hawks. Why has this organization seemingly flourished out of London, when throughout much of Africa, and again this is not my research but colleagues, it's run into problems, being closed down, kicked out of the country, etc., in a whole range of other African countries. Chad, Mozambique, Kenya, Mali, Somalia, Nigeria, it's run into problems in other parts of the country and so forth. So here we have an Islamic charity which has links to, or had, I should say, maybe still does, to Boko Haram. Clearly being thrown out of other African countries or closed down or restricted because of alleged terrorist links, and yet flourishing in London, so it would appear. And I don't want to put myself forward as an authority on that, but I did try and check things out, and that was what came to mind. So I just leave those 5 points with you, really, that I think there are a lot of questions about the genesis of Boko Haram, certainly its links with the Algerian secret services, who are the major allies of America, Britain, and France to some extent, in the whole nature of counter-terrorism, if that's not the wrong word for it, throughout much of North Africa and the Sahel and right across. Big question marks there. And what is absolutely certain, I think, out of this is that Yusuf was in that camp. He was trained there. And the suspicion that he may have been killed because of what he knew, he was aware of those sort of links, as I've mentioned to you. And also his two mentors may also have met their deaths for the same reason, that he'd spoken to them about this. There is evidence in writing communications from Yusuf to them about American links of sorts, nothing very specific, but they're mentioned, and also mention of Algeria and going there for training. So really all I can do is leave you with a lot of questions. Those of you who are looking for a PhD, go ahead, run with it. You know, you needn't worry about plagiarizing my efforts. I'm plagiarizing a colleague, more or less. I'll leave you with those points, that a lot of big question marks to my way of thinking. I should just say something, that over the last 10 years, 12 years, I have been asked hundreds, I was going to say thousands, but certainly hundreds of times, what is the link between Algeria and AQI and Boko Haram? And I had always sort of said, well, I don't really think there is any, you know. I sort of brushed it aside, really, to cover up my ignorance of the question. But the fact that I had never really come across any strong evidence of Boko Haram in being linked to the Algerian secret police until this information was passed to me. And that information is based on about very detailed, very, very high quality academic research from this colleague of mine. And when I started following up on it, and I thought, boy, you know, this really does open a lot of questions. So I'll finish there. I probably can't answer any questions you want to ask me, so I'll pass my questions to you and back to the chair.
Thanks so much. Maybe just one very quick point of information rather than a question. You said this was going to be published. Where?
What was going to be published?
You said you were going to publish.
Yeah, all that information on the training camp, and I will make reference to what I've told you in that, is going to be, I don't know if any of you read any of the sort of stuff I write. I wouldn't want to burden you with it. But, well, there you are, you see. This is why Luqman always invites me here to plug my books. But I've got a trilogy on sort of terrorism in the Sahara. The first one was The Dying Sahara, which was looking for evidence in a sense. The second one is the first one was The Dark Sahara, then The Dying Sahara, which has much more evidence in it. And the third one of the trilogy, which I'm writing now, is provisionally called Kafka's Desert. And if you think of Kafka's trial, those of you who have a more intellectual upbringing than I have, and think of various legal trials relating to terrorism in the Sahara, particularly the latest in Amanat's inquest in London, you will see that we really are looking at smoke and mirrors in just about everywhere we go. So the third volume is called Kafka's Desert, and in that this training camp will play a central part in the book, and out of that this information on Yusuf will be in there. It won't be out till next year, I'm sure. So.
Would you be a bit more clear about the title of that work?
The third volume, provisionally entitled Kafka's Desert. Yeah. So it follows The Dark Sahara, The Dying Sahara. Then I was trying to look for something like the Just Sahara, and I gave up. And I was sitting in court, realizing that this is Kafka's. No one knows who's what. So Kafka's Desert.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Luqman, is Abdullahi around? Or?
No, I couldn't connect with him.
Okay.
Internet broke down.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we'll turn then to our fourth speaker, who's Abubakar Kagu from Sussex.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think I will.
How does it could be? All right. You just speak in here. It's fine.
You sure?
You don't need that.
How strong is that?
Yeah.
First, let me say it's my pleasure to be with you this great evening, and I will seize this pleasure again to welcome His Excellency Dr. D.S. Tafida for being with us here at Sussex. And on behalf of the Nigerian Society, we appreciate your presence. And the presence of the Prof Vice Chancellor, who left my faculty and to be at the top echelon of the Sussex administration. Thank you very much. First and foremost, I hope, JoAnn, since we could not get Abdullahi, you'll give me the opportunity to have a little more than 15 minutes. And I need that time for so many reasons. The foremost is that Maiduguri is my home, and that was where Boko Haram started. I have met Yusuf in my life. I've been to his headquarters, Marrakesh. I have a huge family still living in Maiduguri. I spent the better part of my life there, my high school, my diploma. I attended the University of Maiduguri. I was the president of the Students' Union in 2004. So we saw Boko Haram coming. We saw it grew into the monster it is today. And there are a lot of theories about Boko Haram and a lot of mystery. And I understand why there's a huge crowd here today, because people really don't understand that. And to be honest, let's take a step back and look at how the world of research had evolved. You'll agree with me that if you're in social sciences and try to study societies, cultures, policy, and politics, that your school will insist you go to the field and do some empirical work. This is because no theory ever explains human dynamics. They're very complex. So I'm going to speak from a practical perspective, from the experience I had in the 15 years I spent, from the time Yusuf was driving his small Italian-made Vespa to the time he became a rich man overnight. And then it became a mystery to all of us. And we have to take a step back as well to start connecting the dots. I was asked to talk about Boko Haram from a poverty-driven perspective. But issues around Boko Haram are so multifaceted. They are so multifactorial. But then I don't have all the time to talk about all the things I have seen over the last 10 years or more. But if I'm to ever write a biography of myself, there will always be Boko Haram mentioned there. Because I lost 3 friends who were lawyers, my schoolmates, to this madness. I lost an attaché of mine while I was a senior magistrate in Yobe State, who is a policeman, to this madness. I lost a prosecutor in my office to this madness, who is a police officer. I lost 2 prison officers who I work with to this madness. I lost a cousin that until today I take care of his orphans to this madness. And I really appreciate the perspective that comes through theories and through assumptions. The reason is because most scholars and even journalists in Nigeria may have very little to say or write about Boko Haram, but through theories and assumptions and speculations. But Maiduguri is a very remote region of Nigeria. It's at the far northeast of Nigeria. With the exception of Ahmed Salkida, no journalist can say that he has been to these places and he's writing from experience. Most of the times I wake up in the morning and I call my friend Aminu to say, I saw something on the news and they're saying this and that about Boko Haram. It baffles you. Because someone will wake up in Abuja or Lagos and then he will just write an article and you will see it on the paper. They've not been there. They're still not there. There's no press there. What I do when I become concerned about this news is to make 2 or 3 phone calls. My first source of information is the former commander of the civilian JTF, who happens to be a school friend. We went to diploma together. The civilian JTF, okay, let me express this. It is the community vigilante resistance group that sent Boko Haram out of the enclave of Maiduguri. They were the ones that made Maiduguri safe today, that people sleep with their both eyes closed. This happens to be a friend of mine. We did diploma together. And then when the resistance began, they were among the foremost people to say, no, we can't tolerate this anymore. We have to wake up. If after 3-4 years the military could not save anyone, then we have to wake up and save ourselves. And that is human nature. There's a point you'll be pushed that you have to react. And that reaction came in a forming vigilante groups of both the educated, the uneducated, youth in the streets, and so on and so forth. But then, to understand this perspective of poverty that I want to talk about, one has to understand the demography of Maiduguri, Borno State. Up here, does the mouse work here? Yeah, thank you. This is the Lake Chad. Sorry. This is the Lake Chad. The whole of this region that I'm cycling is the enclave of Boko Haram. This is where the fighting is going on now. But then, here they have home advantage. I will come to that much later. This is Maiduguri, the state capital. This is where it was born, but then now they have moved back where they belong. And that is why it is becoming extremely difficult for the army here. And it will take a while before they fish them out of this place. But then I'm very optimistic the end is near. Then this is Lake Chad. Now, let's talk about why and how poverty aggravated this situation.
Charmaine, can you stop the dog from barking?
Okay, she just mutes her own end.
She needs to hear.
She should mute her computer. Mute it.
How can you hear?
Her own system.
Can you mute your computer? Can you mute?
Can you mute your computer? Mute it. Mute it. Where?
Okay.
It's complicated.
I've muted it.
You've muted it, right?
I'm just put the dogs away. They're barking too loudly. I'll tell them to release them. Take them to the back, please.
Okay.
Be quick.
Yeah. Let's talk about the character of Maiduguri, which is very peculiar from Borno State from all other parts of Nigeria. This is the only state that borders 3 countries: Chad, Cameroon, and Niger. When you talk about borders, you talk about formal frontiers with barriers and custom and immigration checks and what have you. That's what we all see. But there are no borders here. These are just our own imaginations of borders. There are no borders here. It's an open space, more than 700 kilometers of vast land. You can just go in and out. There are communities here like Banki, which is a city like Brighton. While you move in the streets of Banki, someone will tell you you're already in Cameroon. Oh my God, let me step back to Nigeria. This is how these places are. You go to Dorombaga, and then someone will tell you, oh, let me go to Boso and come back. Boso is Niger. The map is like this, and I think the Berlin conference did not do very well about this. Yeah, it's like, it's just something else. So basically there are no borders here. You just move across. So over the years, what we saw and what research revealed was the shrinking of Lake Chad. In every desert area in the world, the pipeline for livelihood is where there is little water. This Lake Chad serves all these border communities, particularly the ones in Chad, Niger, and Nigeria. From 1963, if you look at this map, this is Lake Chad in 1963, 1973, 1987, 1997, and this is Lake Chad today. It has shrunk. And then, this is a map. You see all these communities. These are the major places, like towns. There are more than 1,900 small villages across this place. So what we saw between 2000 and 2008 was the rise in poverty because of these conditions, particularly in these border areas, and then mass migration from all of these communities into Maiduguri. We see these young men hawking in the streets, and when they speak Kanuri, that is my language, the language Sheko speaks in some of his videos, the ones Mohammed Yusuf uses to do his pitching. When they speak this language, we laugh at them because we know they're like from these remote places, like someone comes from Liverpool and speaks to someone in London. It's like there's that difference. Like the accents are very different. We know where they are from. Very young men. And what we saw is a huge army of young, unemployed, uneducated men trooping into Maiduguri. Not only from these Nigerian borders, but from Chad, Cameroon, and Niger. They all came in search of greener pasture because there is not much to do out there. The lake is drying. Kumadugu Yobe, which is serving Yobe all the way down to Jigawa, is drying. So young men are moving to the city. And then another peculiar aspect of Maiduguri is this, that of all the cities in Cameroon, Niger, and Chad, there is no city as big as Maiduguri. It has a population of over 2 million people. It has been there for over 7 centuries. It is the seat of Khan and Borno Empire, which is one of the longest empires in the history of the world. So it became like a hub of opportunity. But were there opportunities? What did they see to come into Maiduguri? That was the period of oil price boom, and Nigeria's economy depends very much on oil. So many politicians that go to the center come back to Maiduguri, building high-rise buildings, and constructions were happening all over. And then, because it is a democratic government, there are other like government infrastructures been put in place and so on. That looks like an opportunity for many young men to come, but they came and it wasn't there. Then they just became an army of unemployed, uneducated men in the streets. So, this is a map of their life, where most of them are. This is the Shauri area. This is the Shaw's Palace. This area is where the Koromela is, where Yusuf started his preaching. And that is like 200 meters away from one of my family houses. He comes there to preach every night. And most of these young men come to this place because this is like a shanty town. It's like a ghetto, but it is huge. It has a population of over 600,000 people. Shauri, Mafoni, Fezan, Gwenge, it's a cycle. It's an old city at the center, at the heart of Maiduguri. They can't afford accommodations in other places except they go to the outskirts. And if you're this kind of people, to even pay your transport back to the city to work in the day is very hard. So you need to find a place here. But then that place has to be affordable. And the best thing to do is to go to a shanty town. That's where you and 4 of your friends can share a room. Just keep your stuffs and sleep outside because it's a very hot region. So this place is where the whole of Boko Haram started, this area. This was where it started. So I talked about the vulnerable young man. Then I will talk a little about this, Yusuf and the rise of Marcus. From 2002, 2003, 2004, Yusuf was an ordinary boy to, like the professor was saying, he was very right. He was an ordinary boy running errands for Jafar Muhammad Adam, who is a very renowned scholar. He comes to Maiduguri during Ramadan and goes back. But then suddenly, they fell apart. And then Yusuf suddenly became a different man, not the ordinary boy that rides a Vespa, but now a well-polished man with a good car, a good house. And when they fell apart, and the reason for their falling apart could be anything, but what is known to most of us is that Jafar was seriously against Yusuf preaching of this ideology of young men come together and don't take anyone serious. You are this society, this Western education, Western stuff. Jafar was not really keen about that. So now he created an ideology and then he built a fraternity. The strict allegiance and rejection of any rational debate regarding religion. Boko Haram don't engage in any debate. They don't believe in any debate. They don't. You can't engage in any rational debate with a Boko Haram man. And that had cost so many people their lives. Then, they believe that society had been corrupted and must be returned to pure ideals based on their definition of equity. What Yusuf does is try to show them or give examples with these beautiful cars coming in because of oil boom and politics and what have you. You see this man? I've listened to a lot of his preachings, and you will understand him more if you understand Kanuri. You see this man? They're just going to steal people's money from Abuja. Come and buy. They're not good people. You are the ones that God likes, and so on. He keeps telling them what they want to hear. And then they turn around and see the buildings, see the cars, and they feel, okay, yeah, he's telling us the truth. I believe in only Sharia system can restore the pure and unadulterated teaching, and that it is the only way there can be justice. This is something they hold so dear. Then, what is Marcus? Marcus used to be an abandoned warehouse. It is in a place called Angwondoki. It belongs to Bujifai, a former commissioner in 2003, 2005. He is an in-law to Yusuf. He gave Yusuf Marcus. And Yusuf made Marcus to be the headquarters of Boko Haram. From a man that goes around communities and preach, he became like the static commander that people only come to Marcus to meet Yusuf. It came to a point that at any moment you go to Marcus, the list you will find is 3,000 to 4,000 young men doing nothing. That's the list. They are doing nothing. So basically that was how Yusuf built this ideology and this fraternity. He found very vulnerable young men. These are people that most of them have a kind of a little education of the Quran. Of course, they recite the Quran, but they don't have knowledge of the science of the Quran. So it is very easy to indoctrinate them the way you indoctrinate other young extremists around the world. Just cherry pick from the Quran, tell them one or two verses, then come back to the issue of politics, tell them about Iraq, Palestine, and Afghanistan, give them a gun and money, and you have an extremist. Simple. So, now I have talked about Yusuf and Marcus, yeah. Then, in 2009, like Keenan was saying, there was an uprising, a kind of conflict between Yusuf and the army, his members in the army, and then he was killed. I don't want to go into those details because that's a very common knowledge and anybody can get that. But then what followed after 3 days of conflict and the arrest of Yusuf? Yusuf was arrested by the army. He was interviewed by the army, handed over to the police, and about 7-8 hours later, he was just brought out by the police and shot in broad daylight. That was what happened to Yusuf. That was what happened to him. That's why people are asking so many questions. This is a man that was leading a group that was violent. He was arrested, interviewed, handed over, while bring him out and shoot him in cold blood. So this question so many people ask, I don't know why they did it, I don't know why it happened, but that was what happened. But what followed was the total breakdown of law and order. Total breakdown of law and order. In the sense that the police now went all out, because Boko Haram was the first to attack the police. They went to the police college, that was their first point of attack. But that actually preceded an incident where an army officer killed some of their men when they threatened him. So it was an incident followed by an incident that resulted in this war in July 2009. But when Yusuf died, immediately they knew Yusuf had died, then that presented a vacuum, a huge vacuum of leadership. And it resulted in a total breakdown of law and order. In the sense that the police will go into a community, raid, bring young men, shoot them in broad daylight. The Boko Haram boys will go at night, ambush policemen, kill them, take their weapons, come back. But there is another thing I want to discuss here, which is very important. People that don't really understand why Boko Haram was killing people and was still living within the community. This is a very huge debate in Nigeria. Why are the people in Maiduguri allowing Boko Haram to stay among them? Why don't you show them? Since you know them and they're living amongst you. As I told you earlier, they live in these places that are more like shanty towns. For people that know the favelas in in Caracas or Bogota or Sao Paulo or Rio, wherever you find a favela where the rate of crime is high or poverty is very high, there is always this suspicion between them and the authorities. They see the authorities as foes, and they see any outlaw as a friend. And because of the way law and order broke down, and these people came back into the community with arms, it is not easy for someone to just wake up and say, okay, come police, let me show you these people. Once you do that, then you should expect that the whole of your family will be wiped out. You don't go to a favela in Brazil and go invite the Brazilian police to come, and then you go in with them as a member of the favela, with family in the favela, and start showing, okay, this is Boko Haram, this is Boko Haram. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. These are deja vus. These are things that happen all over the world. They have patterns. But then, scramble for new leadership. That was when Shekau came on board. But even before the death of Yusuf, Shekau was a kind of, his level of extremism is to the extent that we all think he is mentally deranged. He is a very vicious man, a very dangerous man. That vacuum created the opportunity for Shekau to assume leadership of Boko Haram. But then now, at that time, they have retreated into this enclave. They have left Marrakesh. They are now back in these favelas. And the revenge and counter between them and the police and the army continued. And then Maiduguri became a city under siege. It came to a point that it took over 9 months. Police don't go into this favela, which has more than 500,000 people. They can't, nobody goes in there. No man in uniform goes in there. It has become a no-go area for everyone. So, that resulted in militarization of the whole region. The military was sent in, but there's very little they can do because they don't know these people. They can't tell who is Boko Haram and who is not. And that gave Boko Haram another opportunity. They go out, strike a military checkpoint, kill 1 or 2 soldiers, and when the soldiers come in, they don't care who is Boko Haram, who is not. They do whatever they want to do, kill 10, 15, 20 people, and move out. So that breakdown of law and order continued. And then, just like any other extremist group or a criminal organization, they started turning against the people in the favelas. Taking away, like a young man will come to you with a gun and say, give me your phone. You know that is extortion, that is theft. And you know that this is someone you know in this community, just because he's gone and killed a policeman and has a gun, now he's coming back to threaten you. And then it became so obvious to everyone that the army cannot actually do anything about these people unless the community rises against them. Because it is the community that can find them. That gave the rise of these local resistance groups, which were later given like cars and uniforms, and they became the civilian JTF, and they were formalized so that they don't become another mob. Now, when that happened, Boko Haram was chased out of Maiduguri, and then they moved back to their bases, where they came from, these communities, Baga, Bama, Monguno, Kondiga, where the fight is going on now. So what they did is, most of them now returned to base, where they came from, and the army has to go there and fight them, and it is going to be a bit difficult, because you are now meeting someone in his home. They have left these territories. I think I've taken a lot of time, but then I have to talk about these things. I understand all the myth about Boko Haram, and then you will keep only this afternoon, one pundit and another government spokesman would do apologies to the High Commissioner, a critical legal scholar, so how would say this thing, was talking about things that are just not there. But then this is a man that has never been there. He does not even understand the demography of this place. But he made claims. And the reason for this myth is because the information that is coming out, the official statement that is coming out, everything coming out, all the articles people read are just based on assumptions, so they always conflict each other. There's a lot of conflict in the information about Boko Haram because there's no place, there's remote, the place is very remote, there's inconsistency in official statements. Shekau is dead, he resurrected, Shekau is dead, you know. So basically that is it. But then, because as an academician, and I'm standing in an academic environment and within an academic hall, I have this immunity to talk about things. When all this mystery about Shekau's death and nobody can tell you what and how was going on, I call, let me just give him the name Mose. I don't want to mention his name because this is live streamed and I don't want him being taken by either the SSS or what have you. But I called him. He is one of the commanders of the civilian JTF, and I asked him, Mose, tell me the truth about this man. What is really going on? He said to me, Kagu, to be honest with you, the Shekau you know is dead. What happened was, in an encounter in the Chadian border, Cameroonian border, he sustained a great deal of injury, and then he died. We didn't know about this until we arrested Kulloma. Kulloma was a commander of Boko Haram. Until we arrested Kulloma, it was Kulloma that disclosed to us in earnest that the Shekau is dead, and Kulloma was the very person that helped in burying Shekau. This was an account from a commander of the civilian JTF. This is a statement that even the officials actually don't have. And I'm giving you this as a privileged information. But then it's not privilege, it's all over the world now. But that is it. That was what happened. That is what the people there said. So, going to the second myth is that Boko Haram is a well-organized group with command and control structure. And when you're looking at Boko Haram in YouTube, this is what you see. Shekau giving commands, sending messages with all his lieutenants and what have you. In reality, this is Boko Haram. This is Boko Haram. This is Boko Haram. This is real Boko Haram. It is not like it is a structured command and control, what have you. But then that message has to go out for a lot of people to make money. You have to show that it is a very serious organization that this and that. But this is Boko Haram. This is Boko Haram. This is Boko Haram. And the reason why I should tell you that this is Boko Haram is because these were the people that first chased them out of the city. A well-structured organization with a command control cannot be chased out with sticks and machetes. It's not possible. That's not possible. So then, another myth is that Boko Haram have foreign fighters coming in to assist. So many times you see that the army kill 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 members of Boko Haram, then you find someone among them with very fair skin. And then to a Nigerian, these are foreign fighters coming to fight with Boko Haram. That's not true. These 3 are my friends. This one is a research student. This one is a lawyer. And this one is an administrator. This is the wife of the former president of military president of Nigeria, John Sani Abacha. I just picked these pictures to tell you that in Borno State and at the borders with Chad, and then in local governments like Kalabalgi in Borno State and Jager local government, you have a very reasonable minority of people that are Arab descendants. These are the Shua Arabs. This guy's name is Arab, Muhammad Arab. They speak Arabic. You will estimate their population to be between 300 to 400,000. These are fair-skinned people that are ancestrally Arabs. And when a columnist or a newspaper man sitting in the comfort of his office in Lagos or Abuja sees a picture snapped of Boko Haram with a white-skinned colored guy with a curly hair, oh, foreign fighters are in there. That's not true. That's not true. That's just not true. And then foreign funding and arms. Boko Haram actually doesn't need foreign funds and it doesn't need foreign arms. It has taken enough from Nigerian banks. It has taken enough arms from the Nigerian army. That is the truth. This is the multinational joint task force command in Baga that was recently sacked by Boko Haram. It was in Baga in Nigeria. You see all these things behind? These are cache of arms belonging to the Nigerian army. You can go find this on Facebook. Like it is huge, large enough like to be almost the quarter of this hall. They just came and took over everything. Someone that has this, why would he go looking for arms? This is another myth. They don't go looking for arms. They've already taken enough. And then about money, Damaturu is a capital city. They robbed a bank in Damaturu. Mubi, sacked the whole of Mubi. Mubi is the economic hub of Adamawa State. It has a population of more than 500,000 people, or maybe almost 1 million, Murtala. They sacked Bama. Bama is the hub of petroleum smuggling and transport into Cameroon. It is in Borno State. They sacked Baga. Baga is one of the largest fishing communities in the whole of Nigeria. And all these places they go to, they break the banks. They take money. They have money to give other organizations like Al-Shabaab. So it's not true. Boko Haram doesn't need foreign funding. It doesn't need foreign arms. It has taken enough from Nigeria. But then, why were they allowed to take all this from Nigeria? That is a question for another day. I don't want to go into that. So basically, I want to share something with you here. Sorry, maybe I've talked for too long. But then I have to. Yeah, it's all right. Sorry, I don't need the volume. So this is just an example of how Boko Haram gets its arms. This was when they raided Goza. There was a military base in Goza. They went to Goza. They raided the whole of Goza. Is the 3rd or 4th largest local government in Borno State. They went in. They raided the whole military base. The army left, and they took all the arms that were in the base and left to their enclaves. So basically, this is, and you will see the ragtag I was talking about in this video. They made this video. They have the confidence of attacking the army, making their own videos. Like you were attacking them and were making videos to upload on YouTube. So this was how they came. Carefully looking at this, you don't see a structured army. You see? This was an incident in the last quarter of last year. It's just about 4 minutes, 3 minutes, I think. And then that's the end. I will just round up. Let me move it a bit forward. So did you see these vehicles? Observe this color, the color of this vehicle they came with to attack this base. So now they are at the base. Did you see the same vehicles inside? That last one they took from the army in a previous operation, and now they're taking another. This is the base. So they are now in the base. The army had left. So they are now at the base. This guy was calling his colleagues to come in. Nobody is in. So unfortunately, nobody. I don't think anybody died in this raid. But this is the army that left. So the army actually left. So this is the army leaving the base. And this is Boko Haram, and these are the... So now they're inside, and look at what they're taking from this base. Like cache of arms. They just take these things and go away. And they use the same vehicles and arms to go and raid another military base, take and go. So, these are all arms. So these are them. Like one man cannot carry the boxes. They need help. They carried everything. They are loading everything now. They loaded all these things in the last quarter. You see these ammunitions and everything. So basically, This is it. Boko Haram doesn't need money. Boko Haram does not go hunting for money. Boko Haram doesn't need fighters. It doesn't go hunting for foreign fighters. This ragtag group you see are the same groups that move around. And lastly, I will talk about whether there is any end in sight. Well, I will talk with some cautious optimism. There could be an end in sight. Because unlike other groups around the world, like we hear about ISIS, we hear about, what do you call this other group in Somalia? Al-Shabaab. Boko Haram lacks local and communal legitimacy. They are being chased out of these communities by the people in these communities. Despite all the hullabaloo about ISIS and what have you, ISIS still has some degree of legitimacy where they operate. The Sunnis in Mosul and so many other Sunnis in Iraq don't actually feel so much about ISIS the way me and I feel. Because they see the army that was put by Nur al-Maliki in the last 70-80 years as more of a Shia militia, not an Iraqi army. And many of them were persecuted. Al-Shabaab, operating in some parts of Somalia, the World Food Program sometimes has to go through Al-Shabaab to give food. They have legitimacy. Boko Haram doesn't have that legitimacy. That was why they ran away from the cities and went into Sambisa forest, to live in the forest. But then after they went to the forest, and after about 9 months and nobody went to the forest to attack them, then they came back and started taking cities, small towns. So they don't have the legitimacy to come back and reintegrate in the society. But that is another challenge, in the sense that I had the High Commissioner talking about reintegrating them. The problem with reintegration is that the community might not accept Boko Haram members back into them. Not the civilian JTF, not the people I know. That is one challenge. So for Boko Haram, they know, as much as I do, that it is fight all the way to the end. Nobody is going to open the door for any Boko Haram person to come back. It's not possible. The government might negotiate with Boko Haram a million times, but there is no door for them to come back. That is one challenge. And I think we have to look at that from an institutional perspective, but definitely no son of Maiduguri or anybody living in the cities will open his arms and say, okay, Abuja had negotiated with Boko Haram, you can now come back. No, it's not possible. No. Yeah, that's the problem. It's not going to happen, because I'm talking to you from the perspective of someone that lived through this. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They will not accept Boko Haram in their midst now. No, even if the whole of our institutions will come together, and bureaucrats, and will bring Boko Haram members, the moment you take your step out of Maiduguri, they will lynch Boko Haram. I know. I'm telling you this. That is just what it is. And thank you. Yeah. One last note. Yeah, one last note to the High Commissioner. I think there is the need to look at the root of Boko Haram. Forget about Yusuf as a person or Sheko as a person, people that have their own clandestine motives, which many of us will not understand. But look at the vulnerable young man whose head is deep in the mud and he is hopeless, who can be indoctrinated with the simplest of arguments, who doesn't have the opportunity, who does not see a future for himself. I think it is important to look at the Boko Haram, because the roots, because that still exists. There's this disenfranchisement, there's lack of employment, there's lack of opportunities, and a total breakdown of economic opportunities. Thank you very much.